Good afternoon, everyone. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Nithya Poornima. I think, Doctor, we've been trying to have this meeting between our parents and along with you, for a discussion for the longest time. And I'm so glad to have you here with us, especially at a time like this when we need your advice and your counsel the most. And I'm so glad it's on a platform like this where we can reach out to so many parents with young children across all borders. Um, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nithya Poornima. She is a clinical psychologist and she is at present working with NIMHANS in the Department of Clinical Psychology. And some of her key areas of interest are parenting. Correct? Am I correct, Doctor?
Yes, yes.
Yes, she's also interested in yoga and mindfulness and fostering emotional well being amongst children. And I think she's the right person to help us here to understand the pandemic situation and the impact it's having on us and our children. Doctor, what's really paramount in all our minds is the question, is this pandemic, the effect that it's having, going to impact us in the long run? And what other steps and measures can we take to combat the situation and to minimize the impact, if not to mitigate it altogether? Um, I think that's the question that we all are asking ourselves, and we would love for you to answer. And I'm sure our parents also will have their own questions in mind. So, parents, please feel free to type a question in the chat box, and Doctor will definitely address those questions once the session is over. So, over to you now, Dr. Nithya.
Ma'am, it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here today to be able to speak to parents of young children. Thank you very much for the kind words of introduction. While I do have expertise in the area of clinical psychology and mental health and working with young children, I often remind myself that I'm yet another person who's in the midst of this pandemic. I haven't been through a pandemic of this sort before. And therefore, the struggles that each one of you are going through are my struggles too. Just because I have a certain experience or professional expertise does not exempt me from the impact of the pandemic. I'd like to place that on record first, because I truly believe that we're all together in this. Yes, and together we are stronger, we learn from each other, we support each other. And therefore, I'm really glad for this opportunity to connect to a community of parents of young children to see how we could accept the pandemic and its impact first, and then to see how do we take care of ourselves in the midst of it. Yes, so I'm going to just share a few slides to cue me to talk to you. I'll try and do this in a brief while so that we can have more time to discuss questions and have interaction. So, in some ways, the pandemic has hit us like a wave that we did not anticipate to be of this nature. And this magnitude, and therefore I think the human race is also trying to see how best we could deal with this. So pandemics, as you know, are illnesses that have spread over a wide geographic area and that have fairly significant health risks. And in that sense, pandemics are not new. In the course of the human race, there have been many pandemics. So these are a couple of images. The one above is a representation of the Antonine plague which happened in 165 AD. And then the picture below is a file copy of an image of a hospital ward. And this is a scene from the 1918 Spanish flu. So, in that sense, pandemics are not new and the effects are not new. Right? So, this is a infographic that I found on the internet, which has visually described various pandemics across various time periods and what has the impact been in terms of the death toll. And in that sense, if you see, of course, this was dated March 17th, 2020. Sorry. Yeah, this was dated March 17th, 2020. But you do see that the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact is just a minuscule dot. Of course, the dot has grown bigger in the last couple of months. At the same time, this is just to say how we need to put things into perspective. These are not unfamiliar scenes to you. Since the time of the lockdown in various parts of the country, various parts of the city, you'd have seen deserted streets, deserted common places, all in an effort to contain the spread of this particular illness. Now, what do pandemics do to us emotionally and psychologically? Now, these are a few common elements that I've tried to distill through looking at various pandemics and their impacts. So, one thing that it clearly does is it takes away the known and the familiar. It takes away things that we are so used to and take for granted. Traveling, transport, community engagement, interacting with people, handshakes and hugs, right? So many things that we just take for granted and that are so familiar and part of our everyday living, a pandemic takes away. It in some ways enforces us to think about what is really essential. What do we need the most? What are the most important things and what can we do away with? And these are not questions that oftentimes we ask ourselves when there is no major health risk, when there is no ongoing epidemic or a pandemic. And these questions can be highly uncomfortable and evoke a lot of uncertainty in us as adults, right? I'm just talking at the moment about what it does to us as humans, but as human adults. It evokes a sense of worry about what's likely to happen, what might happen to our goals and aspirations and dreams, fear about the next few days, weeks, months, and years, our life course, right? Like Mrs. Sandy Phillip mentioned at the beginning of this talk, the biggest question is this going to impact us in the long term? How is it going to impact us? What can we do to deal with it in the best way? So these are all also questions in some ways that represent our fear and not unfounded. There is sadness about what is lost, what we miss. There's some degree of hopelessness. We see so many people choosing to end their lives, feeling compelled to end their lives amidst these very, very challenging circumstances. Right? So it evokes a lot of uncomfortable, distressing, and in some ways insurmountable feelings. It also, in some ways, enforces isolation. Now, isolation, if you look back at the many pandemics, very early on, quarantine, isolation have been looked at effective measures of stopping the spread of a particular illness. Now, it's really a double-edged sword because if you do not isolate and quarantine, the illness is going to spread. But when you do isolate and quarantine, our basic human needs of companionship, of belonging, of social support are not met. So, though we may be physically safe, it really deprives us of our emotional needs. And then the stigma of people who have had the illness, who have recovered, who are working with the ill. We see so many instances where fear drives others to keep those who are ill and who are recovering away and treat them harshly, all in an effort to keep themselves safe. So, in that sense, we also then need to understand how all of this is impacting a developing child. Right? I'm sharing all this because no child lives in a vacuum. Every child lives in a family, which is in a neighborhood, in a community, in a nation, which belongs to the world. So, in some ways, everything that affects the world, the nation, the community, the neighborhood, the family also impacts the child in a certain way. So, what has happened is that, as in many difficult circumstances, there are people who view the situation as an obstacle, as a hurdle, which is stopping them from pursuing their dreams and aspirations, goals, and so on. And there are people who are viewing this as an opportunity to do things that matter to them and to others around them. It is a huge challenge to keep the population of the world safe and in sufficient degree of well-being, physical, emotional, social, financial, spiritual well-being. At the same time, I'm sure each of you have come across at least a few examples of how so many people have found ways to help others. Serve food to the needy, arrange for migrant workers to get home, facilitate jobs, facilitate healthcare, help take care of the final rituals of the deceased when nobody else is coming up to do that. So, in a way, these sort of difficult circumstances are also an opportunity for humanity to rise and to show their strength, to show their courage, to show all that they are truly capable of. And we are seeing examples of that on a day-to-day basis. There are so many people who have become creative, who are innovative, who are moving ahead in their fields of work to see how this challenge could be converted into an opportunity for the better good of others. So it's important that we keep that balance in mind while we are looking at the impact on children as well. Quickly, to look at what's happening with urban Indian families, I'm just going to highlight a few points. Firstly, it is a reality that many Indian households have lost income, as across the globe. So many people have lost their jobs or at least had a pay cut. And it's also seen those with lower incomes have been more severely affected. It's also seen that there are a lot of emotional responses, or rather reactions, to the ongoing situation. So, in a study done with over 500 people in India, it was found that large majority of people reported high degree of worry about contracting the COVID-19. They also had high worry about financial losses. And about 25 to 30% of the participants also expressed that they felt their very existence was threatened by the pandemic. They also found it very difficult to adjust to a new routine. Yeah, these are all adults we are talking about. And very disturbing, yet the ground reality is that between March 25th and May 31st, the period of lockdown in India, there has been a 10-year high in domestic violence complaints. So what they've done is they've looked at the number of complaints between this period of end of March to end of May for 10 years. And they've said it is in this year that the number of complaints have been the highest. Now, what does this tell us? At the very minimum, it tells us that everybody is very, very stressed, that they do not seem to have the resources to deal with the demands placed on them. And they are responding and reacting in ways which may be unhelpful, unhealthy, and they're struggling. Right? I'd like to believe that nobody does this intentionally. It is because of an inability to choose better that this happens. Now, when adults are going through this, worried about their health, worried about their financial health, worried about their future, unable to handle interpersonal relationships effectively, you can then imagine the kind of emotional air a child is likely to be breathing. Most households have their television on or are checking the news very regularly through the day on their phones or other gadgets. There is a constant conversation about these things. It's not uncommon for young children to be talking about what is the COVID score today, which area has been locked down, which area has been sealed down, or to say, don't go out, you will get corona. Right? So they are aware of the anxieties in the air. Now, moving on to what is happening to children. Again, information from India says how just in the first 11 days of the lockdown, there were 92,000 calls on the child line. Right? So we do know that children are a vulnerable population. Not because they cannot think for themselves, but because it is so difficult to act in their defense. Right? It is very easy for adults to scapegoat a child as opposed to a spouse or a boss. And therefore, when adults are stressed and are unable to manage it, then it does trickle down to the children in many, many unhelpful ways. Right? And there are also many families who are struggling because school is disrupted. That was the routine we had before the pandemic set in. Many urban Indian families have dual working parents. So they are together in the morning, then each goes to their respective workplace, the school, and then they come back in the evening. Now that's disrupted. Children are not getting the appropriate stimulation that they require. Again, not because of somebody's intention, but because it's simply not possible to manage that many things effectively all the time. So it's okay. It's okay to be imperfect. I think it's a great time for us to remind ourselves that it is not important to be perfect. It is more important to be sensitive and compassionate and to see how we can help each other. It's also seen world over that children with special needs are the most affected because of the lockdown and lack of schooling. So these are things that we need to bear in mind to see how do we go through this? How do we go through this period with minimum negative impact, and how do we facilitate opportunities for well-being? So I'd like to share this particular framework with you, which was given by practitioners who emphasize attachment, right? A strong bond between children and parents. Parents, grandparents, they're significant caregivers in their daily life, and how that becomes a huge anchor point for children to develop their skills, competencies, their own sense of self. And this particular framework talks about how when an adult's brain is stressed, they are unable to be responsive to the child's needs. Yeah, so they basically talk about a brain-to-brain connection. The same parent, when they are relaxed, when they are calm, is likely to be much more sensitive and responsive to a child as opposed to when they are stressed. And stress in parent-child interactions can also be in the form of children having temper tantrums, children being non-cooperative, children not being able to keep up to the pace that an adult requires. These are all moments where a parent's brain can become stressed and therefore in some ways become blind to what a child is experiencing in that moment. Happens to everybody. Right? This is just how brains work. And therefore, what these practitioners have recommended is to adopt a framework where playfulness is a key element in parent-child relationships. As you would have noticed, when you are playing with your child, the quality of interaction is very different. The bond that you feel for each other is very different. The quality of cooperation and compliance is very different as opposed to taking a very task-oriented approach. Do this, do that, do this correctly, and so on and so forth. So playfulness, how can you incorporate playfulness into your routine for yourself, between you and your spouse, as a family, and with your children? The second thing that they emphasize on is acceptance. Whatever it might be that you are experiencing and whatever it might be that the child is experiencing in the moment, accept it. We all enjoy children being happy, cooperative, playful, but it's only natural that they're not going to be like that all the time. They're also going to be tired, bored, too excited, and so on and so forth. So what they suggest is when we accept them and try and be curious, that leads us to the next element of the framework, which is curiosity. So we accept my child is bored, or my child is too excited, or my child is happy, or my child is sad. Be curious, what is it? Rather than assuming we know why this child is doing this. Very often as parents, particularly when we are stressed, we may take the stance that the child is actually not bored, they just don't want to do this. We may make some assumptions which may not really be accurate. And therefore, they emphasize the need to be curious about your child's mind, to try and understand what is it that's going on within them and encourage them to express it. And when they do express it, to be empathic. Yeah, so empathy, as we say, is to be in another person's shoes. So if your 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old is bored, happy, sad, excited, how would it feel to them? Really, as a 3, 4, 5-year-old. Try and feel it for yourself and share it with them. Yeah? So this is a framework that really allows for the connection between parents and children to stay strong, to stay alive, and to stay responsive. So I will stop here, stating how it is really important that we consider ourselves a member of a team and to connect with the team. Yes, whether it is with your spouse, with your family, your neighborhood, your workplace, your child's school, and see how that strength really shines through. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Nithya. Parents, please feel free to type in your questions if you have some on your mind. Doctor, I have a few questions for you if you don't mind addressing them. Um, what would you recommend to parents whose children are probably addicted to the TV or the screen right now as a result of this long lockdown? Many of them, because they cannot go out and play, would definitely choose the easy way out of, taking the remote and scanning, going through channels and watching TV all the time.
Yes. So it's very helpful to have a schedule of activities for the day, one that is custom made for each family, where there is some agreement about when is TV time. Right? It cannot be any time that I'm bored or any time that mom or dad has work. Right? So it needs to be a scheduled time, and it takes a little bit of effort, but it's possible to work routines around so that that sort of a boundary can be respected and children are encouraged to watch only at that point in time. And it's also helpful if they are allowed to watch TV or engage with a gadget after they've done something which requires their effort, right? So whether it is getting ready for the day or having a meal or doing some learning task, when that is done, then they could engage in some TV watching or engaging with a gadget. The reason I say this is because it's so easy to sit with a gadget and feel entertained with the least amount of effort. Now, once children taste that early in the day, their motivation to do other things which require more effort is going to be very less. And then it becomes a sort of a struggle. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other thing is to see how there can be play opportunities created at home, particularly preschool children are quite creative, imaginative. They have a lot of need to use their bodies. So it's possible for parents to try and create small little activities or games where the children can feel as engaged and entertained through those activities rather than spending time with a screen. Yeah.
Correct. They should find more joy doing something else rather than just watching the screen. You're right,
Yes.
Doctor. Um, Also, there was another question that came to mind. What would happen if a parent of a toddler decides to write off this year and have no meaningful engagements at home? Many parents are of this idea that, what would happen if we just do nothing for 1 year? After all, she's just in preschool or he's just in preschool. So, what would you think would happen if this was the situation?
It's a valid question. And, if we were asking this, say, 2 to 3 decades ago, I wouldn't have hesitated as well, because a child being at home and not going to school was quite the norm. The child would play around the house, be around different members of, um, most often, at least a medium sized joint family, which was a lot of learning in itself. Being with different people, interacting with different people, playing by themselves in the sand or with rice and so on. Yeah. But today, leaving a child alone or leaving a toddler alone does not mean the mere absence of school. Like you asked earlier, it means excessive screen time in most families. Right? And that actually is a highly damaging and dangerous exposure for various reasons. Yeah. So, in terms of learning social skills, emotional skills, even in terms of stimulation of cognitive skills, it's very, very difficult for a toddler's brain to adapt to not being in a stimulating environment and having a screen instead. So, if there is a family where they are not looking at any active school-based learning for this year, it's very important that they consider no screen time or very little screen time, and they have a solid plan to help this child meet their developmental needs. No, it's only in that situation can we look at a year of no schooling having very little detrimental impact.
True. Also, another question that came to mind, Doctor. Today we have many parents, both of whom are working at home, and they also have a toddler whose needs have to be catered to. So I'm thinking it'll be really stressful for them to manage everything plus the home. In many homes these days, we don't have our helpers coming in, our cooks and our helpers. So the stress is just too much to handle sometimes. And I think you've already addressed some. What would be your parenting tips for such a family where there's so much stress in the home?
Yeah. So one of the key things is to remind oneself that we are only as good as our own health.
Okay.
Right? There's no point in pushing ourselves over the limit to meet job demands when that starts affecting one's own physical, emotional, relationship health. Right? So I think it's very important for each person to do that check for themselves at least once a day to say, how am I feeling? How healthy am I feeling? Am I feeling too stretched out? Is there something I can let go? What can I say no to? Right? And oftentimes you'll find that it may be possible to find such options where you can say no to some expectations from demand from work. It may be possible to lay some limits from what is expected at work, so that one is in a better state of mind to engage with a child. Right? So even if one is not actively engaging with a child, having a calm parent around has its own benefit for a toddler. A calm parent who's patient with the toddler's exploring of the various objects at home is a very different experience as opposed to a stressed parent trying to teach a child something. Right? And because children's brains are so sensitive, and this is such a crucial period where so many strong memories and networks are created, these experiences can have very strong impacts. Right? And therefore, it's important that as adults, we do that check for ourselves. We build in small little moments to de stress, to help ourselves feel calmer as people, right? And then to see in the role of a parent, what could they do?
Yeah, right, Doctor. Actually, prioritizing our time and trying to see what's really important versus what we can let go of, and maintaining that calm composure no matter what is really, really important at this time. I have just one other question for you. Uh, what would you recommend to parents, uh, who are um, have to cater to the sociological impact of their children not being able to meet their friends, not able to go to school? They're locked in all the time. So that lock-in feeling for children, I'm sure they will not be able to express that anxiety or depression as much as we would in so many words. But I'm sure they would be expressing it in terms of some aggression or some frustration in their behavior. So, what would you recommend parents do when their children need someone other than just their parents sometimes?
Yes. So I'd like to first share this example of how many countries now have started this teddy bear hunt for children.
Mhm.
It originated on the basis of a UK writer's book, which looked at a teddy bear hunt. And therefore, many countries now are putting up teddy bears on their windows so that children who are locked down could, within the safety of their house, do a teddy bear hunt and see how many teddy bears they can spot.
Okay.
Right? So, this is basically to give them a sense that there are things that are meaningful for them, exciting for them, which can still be created, in this sort of very, very uncertain and challenging circumstance. So similarly, parents could also look at what could they do at their own level, right? Could they create small little treasure hunts for their children? Could they look at activities that involve storytelling and story making? The preschool period it's a period where children's imaginations really run wild, and as they are gaining vocabulary, they're so keen to share their own ideas of how things are, and that in fact fosters a lot of resilience in young children when they are able to create stories. And if there's a way for them to share their stories with a friend from school, even over a video chat or over the telephone, right? Talk to a grandparent, show them little drawings that they've made. Yeah. So I think those are also very, very powerful moments for young children where they are able to connect with others other than only their parents. And very often you'll notice how children's eyes light up when you say we're going to talk to somebody today or they're going to see somebody on the camera today, right? Because they have those needs. So it's useful if parents can set aside a little time, um, if possible every day or if not a few times a week, where they can have these conversations. Now there are also these um, upcoming virtual meetings and parties for little children where parents organize, and children are able to see each other on the camera, say some things to each other, and even if they are just eating their own food, they're doing it with everybody together, watching each other. I think these are all possibilities now because of technology, and those are things that can be considered, keeping in mind norms of social distancing and the necessary safety precautions.
Yeah, so I think technology has come to the rescue once again. So I think our children are luckier in the urban areas rather than any other place. So yeah, we at the Free Thinking School also we've been sending home a lot of activities for our parents to do, and we also have a once a week Zoom session where we have a dancing song session for our children, which they love,
Hmm.
interact and enjoy.
Yeah, yeah.
So
May I suggest,
yeah.
if it's possible, and for those parents who are willing, maybe once a week or once in 2 weeks, a small meeting for the parents where there's not much discussion, but just where a small exercise to help them um, anchor their own feelings, for them to feel supported as a parent community. You might already be doing it because you're doing such wonderful work with your community of young children and parents, but just a thought that came to mind.
Excellent idea, Doctor. So yeah, we all need support if we want our children to be um, well and emotionally stable. I think that really is in the hands of the parents to be emotionally stable first, like you rightly mentioned. So a favorable environment for all of us is absolutely essential. And I'm thinking you also have an interest in yoga and probably meditation. So I'm thinking you'll be able to share some benefits of that on emotional well-being.
Yes. So, basically, if you look at the yoga philosophy, it is about integration. It is about integration of body, mind, using breath as a bridge, right? So, when parents and young children engage in practices that involve the body, the breath, and the mind with conscious attention on these, it does help fluctuations in the mind settle down. It does help. It has immense physical benefits. There are a lot of benefits that many people are aware today about the benefits on physical health. But the ultimate aim is also for us to be stable despite challenging circumstances, right? So what we are seeing today is that many people are shaken because of the uncertainties, because of the challenges. But what yoga also trains the body mind to do is to stay stable, whether there is pleasure or pain, whether there are challenges, difficulties, or joyous moments. And I think now is a great period of time for all of us to practice this.
Yes, the fluctuations in emotions shouldn't be too great that it disturbs your mental peace. And I think also a great faith that things are going to change and become normal would help, I think, to stabilize our emotions. We have
Yes.
a parent who has just come in the chat box and left a message for us. Children seem to be more stubborn with parents now. So, how do we discipline them effectively and keep them calm at the same time?
Yeah, that is a challenge, isn't it? It's quite a challenge often. Um, and it's very interesting what you've said. It is true that many a time children do seem to be more stubborn with parents. It's also because parents pick up that rope that the children are yielding to do a tug of war, right? So with many others, there is a smoother interaction of do this, yes, but with parents, it becomes a tug of war, where we also will notice how parents respond to their children when they are stubborn fairly differently as opposed to another child who might be stubborn, right? That we are more insistent, we are more persistent, we say no, it must be done and must be done right away, right? So there are some beliefs that we carry in ourselves about what being a good parent means, what good discipline is, right? And these things play out in our interactions with our children. So I'd like to only remind you about the framework that I shared, the PACE, where in such a moment, if you could step back and see how can I make this a playful moment rather than a tug of war, right? And because when there is playfulness, both your brains are open and receptive. When the child is stubborn, it creates stress in your mind and your brain begins to shut down. And when you become stressed, the child notices it and the child's brain begins to shut down. So it really becomes a tug of war, right? So how can that moment be converted into a moment of playfulness is something that you could explore. Except, yes, my child is refusing to listen to what I'm saying right now. Can I take a step back and say, what's happening in this child's mind? Can I be curious? Not as a parent, but as a person, as an adult who's with this child right now. And then to see how this could be made playful. And you'll oftentimes find there are ways that come to your own mind with nobody telling you what to do. Right? So oftentimes it's just that little shift that one needs to take in perspective, and that is a big challenge, right? Though it's a little shift, it is a big challenge. Yeah. But when you do that repeatedly over and over again and be calm and compassionate with yourself. Now, oftentimes it happens that parents start telling themselves in their heads, what a parent I must be. My 4-year-old is not listening to me. I must be a terrible parent. And that makes them angry. And then, you definitely want that 4-year-old to listen to you right away. And that makes it harder, right? So it's actually easier and more helpful when, as a parent, we are compassionate to ourselves, kind to ourselves, and kind to our children. Okay to take a step back, pause, come back, almost like a dance. You're dancing with your child and your child is refusing to make the move you want. So keep on pushing. The dance is not going to come out nice. But you step back, pause, and say, "Now, how do we move it? And how can I go take this forward?" You'll find ways. I hope that gives you some idea and some perspective on how this could be handled.
Definitely, doctor. And I was also thinking to add that giving the child choices, all of them which are constructive, of course, and all of them which are good for them to do, would be an ideal thing. So that would give them the power to choose and take away the element of discord. So if you don't want to eat, bananas, okay, there's an apple. Would you like an apple? So you give them two healthy, good choices, of which the child has the power to choose one. So that kind of takes away the struggle sometimes to give them choices. Also, the Montessori method, I think we encourage self discipline. So the parent doesn't really have to use the rod or, be aggressive at that point, but allow the child to see for himself or herself the consequences of that action that he chooses, which could have been incorrect at the time, and to discuss that with the child. If they're too small, may not work, but when they come to a point where they can understand, discussing, what happened and why it happened and what could we do it, how could we do this better next time, and doing that reenaction of the whole scenario with them. Let's try this one more time and see how it would work in a better way. I think discussion with the child helps a lot, helps them see.
Yes, yes. I think those are excellent strategies. And oftentimes, though parents know of these, they've read about them, they've heard about it, let's say from the school, the challenge comes in a moment of stress. When they are in that moment having an argument with the child, that's the most challenging moment, because oftentimes one's own experience acts out. If they've had no experience of somebody giving them choices, or somebody discussing consequences and reasoning with them as a young child, what the brain carries as a template from childhood is what flashes forward. And which is why having a parent community, having a support where you can discuss these things and say what's happening. It's not that the parents are ill intentioned or they are less knowledgeable, but often it is their own processing of the experiences they've had as children at the receiving end of parents. And now, when they are as parents, how do they modulate it? So I think it's a great idea to share these strategies and see how parents are experiencing it, what their challenges are, and how those can be mitigated as well.
Yeah, very soon, I think in life we form patterns, and it's very difficult to, like you said, stop, move back, look at it in a different perspective, get some new light on the
Yes.
situation. So, yeah, that's excellent. We have another parent who says, how do you propose we address a lack of interest or reduced attention span towards things a child used to love during earlier? So I guess earlier on, a while ago, a child loved doing something, and now, especially because of the pandemic, there's a change of attitude towards. And I think we have several more queries there. We've noticed an increase in mood swings, and we understand this is natural, all things considered. single child, two working parents dynamic. Is there anything we could do regularly to find a balance? So, several questions to address there.
Yes. So, it seems like you've been perceptive about your child and your child's behavior, because oftentimes mood swings and changes in attention span could also indicate how a child is feeling differently about themselves or about other people or about their environment, which they may not be able to express in words, but they are showing in these sorts of behaviors. Um, and therefore, you're right to see what could be done regularly to strike a balance. One of the biggest challenges for children is to see their parents working at home all the time, right? And earlier also, parents might have worked, but at least for a few hours, the child would have been out at school. Then the child comes back. There's a little bit of engagement. Now, there's no such boundary, right? So it might help if there is a possibility in your home to create a little space between where you work and where you engage with the just even if it's an artificial demarcation, a little board or a tag which says you're at work right now, no? And to see if you and your spouse could take turns. So if somebody is in a meeting that they cannot miss, could the other person be doing something where they can still be available to the child, where it's okay for the child to interrupt you, once or twice, because then that makes it easier for you as parents. You don't feel so high strung that I must keep the child out of the camera and I must be giving my 100% attention to this. So if you and your spouse can sync your schedules in such a way that at least one person is available during the day that you're working, could you also look at taking time off? Is there a possibility that both of you could try and take some time off where you're at home but not working, right? So that can also give you mental space to engage more relaxedly with your child, and incorporating a play time with your child which you consider sacrosanct. Whatever time you think works, 4 to 5 p.m., 5 to 6 p.m., whatever. But consider it like you would consider a meeting. Do not let other things eat into that time. Turn off your mobile, turn off other gadgets. See if you can move and play, see if you can have stories or things that your child likes. Children really thrive on undivided attention. It doesn't matter if you're sitting with them 24 hours. But if they don't have your eyes and ears and hands and feet, that is not attention for them. They don't feel loved. They don't feel seen. Yeah? So if you can even give a dedicated time of half an hour every day, where it's only you and your child. If it's possible, all three of you, your spouse and your child, that can be a great way to bond with your child. And see if it's possible to build in small routines. At lunchtime, you'll have a 10-minute running race before lunch, or a tickling game that will happen, or a story reading time that you'll have. So these are things that when they become predictable, your child will know, okay, now I'm going to bed. My mom or dad is going to come and read me a story. When they have things that are predictable and anchored, then there is lesser reason for them to have mood swings. Right? So it is very challenging. It is extremely challenging. Both parents working, having a little one at home. It's very, very difficult. Yeah. So do be kind on yourself and see where you can make things easier for yourself. And we do know, research clearly tells us, even a few positive things when done regularly and consistently have a huge impact on one's mental well-being. Yeah, it doesn't mean big changes, 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, half an hour here, yeah, a story at bedtime. Just small wedges here and there, but done regularly and routinely make a big impact. All the best.
Yeah, I think Aditya, your answers have come to you. Um, Excellent ideas, Doctor. The child, I think, is really asking for attention, more attention, and not having friends around, and going to school regularly is definitely going to impact them, and they won't have the words to say it except for "I need Mama and Papa more."
Yes,
More of
yes,
you, more
yes.
family time. So excellent ideas to make those small little uh, time slots in the day for the child. Gaurav Kumar Goel also has a question. A lot of time kids come and ask curriculum questions to parents. Despite of answering it correctly, 95% they say you don't know anything and the teachers are always right. Yeah.
Yes, I guess we need to acknowledge teachers are more powerful and more correct in children's eyes than parents are. But yes, it can be very frustrating and annoying when one does, uh, you know, experience moments when the parent kind of rubbishes your knowledge and your intelligence and your efforts to help them out. At the same time, if you look at being curious, what is happening here? Oftentimes, you will find that it is their own anxiety about whether they are right or wrong, whether they have understood teachers' instructions and teaching right or wrong. They're not asking for a right answer as much as they are asking for a validation that they are on the right track. Yeah. And then we fall into the trap. We give them long explanations, find something on Google, explain, and then say, oh, but this is wrong. This is not what my teacher told. And then it can be very upsetting, right? So, what can help is to say, you want to know this? Tell me what you already know about it. What did your teacher say? So, what is this about? So, please be curious. Yeah. Take a position where you say, I don't know, what is this? Tell me, teach me about it. And oftentimes you'll be surprised, they will tell you all the answers themselves. And then you will have a golden moment to say, wow, you've understood so well. You explained it to me beautifully. Great. Yes. So this is oftentimes a tricky thing, to look behind the behavior and say, what feeling is this child operating from? And as you do that more, as you get more curious, as you pause and say, okay, what is this child feeling? What is making this question come? You'll get more and more accurate in your reading. Yeah. So it's okay. It's okay that we're not the experts. It's okay that we don't have the answers. It's okay to say, you tell me. It's okay to say, tell me what your teacher told. It's okay also to say, yeah, that yeah, maybe your teacher knows better. That is why she's teaching you all, teaching so many children, but I'm working as something else. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Children look up to us so much, but no one can actually take your place, Gaurav. As a father, as a mother, no one can ever take your place. But they look up to us, and we adore them. So, on that lovely note, I think we'll end the session. I want to thank you, Dr. Purnima, for taking the time out, for kind of calming our fears, for giving us a perspective on this whole situation and how we can deal with it as a family, as a community, and how we can support each other, which makes so much of a difference. It just, elevates our souls and makes us feel that we're all in this together and we can all surmount this if we rely on one another. And that'll be the way that we'll reach out to our children and give them that assurance and the strength and the resilience to bounce back into normalcy when things get normal. So thank you so much, Dr. Nithya, for taking out time and for your efforts. It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Have
so
a nice
much.
weekend, parents.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Sandy ma'am. I'd also just like to add how this may be a big opportunity for us as individuals and as a community to create new beginnings, right? We want normalcy, but it may not be the normal that we knew a few months back. It's possibly going to be something different, but it's in our hands to see how we can make it better for ourselves in small ways or big. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandy ma'am, for the opportunity to connect with the parent community. I do hope that this interaction has been helpful. And I do believe that, we will, as a community of social beings, come out stronger through this experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Goodbye.
Bye.